We're welcoming you to our Sunday school lesson, introducing you to Clara Maynard. If you haven't met her yet, she's wonderful, and you are going to enjoy this time together with her. And I'll let you kind of keep moving us forward.
Okay.
And I'll be your second in command.
Yes. So I know everybody likes to sit in their favorite spot, but if you want to move a little closer, that might be helpful. But if not, that's okay. I'm not going to divide y'all up in groups like we've been doing, but I will ask questions, and there'll need to be audience participation. So when you raise your hand to indicate you have an answer, Lane will shoot over to you with the microphone if you need it. If you can project, then maybe you won't need it, but Lane will be available. Well, I wanted to just tell everybody thank you for this opportunity because I'm really enjoying this book. It is wonderful. It has a lot of wonderful information, a lot of insight. It makes you think. So it's good. If you haven't gotten a copy, you might consider doing that. I'm sure it's available on Kindle or whatever. And so we'll get started. Well, we're covering chapter 3 in the book, which is practicing piety. And as we start to read the book, she talks about how the Beatitudes and the extensions are telling us how to practice piety. So, how do you define piety? Does anybody have any thoughts? Okay, first you and then Norma. Okay, go ahead. Rightness.
Uprightness.
Uprightness. Okay. Okay, what about you?
Like to me, piety is like prayer, and I pray to God, and I, try to go close to God. To me, that's a prayer of piety.
Yep. Does the idea of piety sound positive or negative to you? For these two ladies, it sounds positive.
It could be negative, though.
Yeah.
Because self-righteousness is a kind of piety. So it could be negative.
Yeah. As we discuss it, I think we'll be able to explore that a little further. Well, in the book, I'm going to just call her JL because, I'm sorry, AJ. That's what the people who are referring to her are calling her. AJ is Amy Jill Levine, our author. So AJ says, to be a disciple means less about believing a set of propositions and more about acting on God's word as interpreted by Jesus. So it's not like there's a set rules. You will pray, you will tithe, you will do this, you will do that. Yeah, we're going to do that, but it's more about our attitude and our relationships and trying to follow Jesus' guidance. Well, with that, I'd like to pray, if y'all would pray with me. Holy God, you who graciously shines your goodness on the world, may your Spirit guide us in this time together toward greater understanding of how what we believe must shape what we do, that we may increasingly glorify you before others in the name of our teacher and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, now everybody's got a Bible in their pew. Can somebody turn to Matthew 6, verse 1? Okay, so can you project or do you need the microphone? Okay.
How much you want? Just 6:1?
Just 6:1.
Okay.
No, I don't need that. Okay, be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven.
Thank you. Okay, so how, if at all, do you believe God rewards those who practice piety? It talks about us being rewarded. Well, how are we rewarded? Are there any thoughts on that? And not these two ladies, other people. Yes,
Serving others.
serving others. You see serving others as a reward.
Uh, uh, the joy that it brings them. So the joy.
Yeah. The feeling of satisfaction, the feeling of fulfillment that you get from helping other people, that's certainly a way to get rewarded for practicing piety.
Recognition from other people, looking at you and saying, oh, how good you are, how holy you are. And so that's, to me, what this is referring to. If I just do it so other people can see it and I don't do it out of the love, then my reward is right then.
Yeah.
That's not, in God's eyes, that's not what God's looking for. He's looking for us lovingly doing it instead of getting rewards here.
But I think, Clara, also that I think it refers to, I think there's a lot of looking at a reward in heaven, that God would be pleased with you, and therefore you, my mom used to say, well, Marilyn, you'll get a star in your crown. That was if I would do what she wanted me to do, but I didn't. So I think there's a concept that runs through this. It's also is that God rewards in some greater way in heaven when we are serving Him or loving Him. And so the big deal with piety is, am I doing it for Him and glorifying Him, bringing Him honor, or am I doing it for you to say, "Woo, what a good girl she is"?
Very true. I think for me too, there's a sense of peace that comes when I feel like I'm on the right track. And you had something to say.
Actually, you just said it. To me, practicing piety is not a thing or this or that or getting this or giving that, but it is a way of life that makes the rough places plain. It smooths out life. And so you don't have to practice it in front of others. You practice it as a way of life. And also, I think it's a process. The word salvation in Greek actually has three meanings. I'm saved, I'm being saved, and will be saved. So,
Probably need that. Because what, did you say it has three meanings?
yeah, the word salvation or salvatore in Greek has three meanings. And a lot of Greek words have three meanings or more. But salvation means I am saved, I am being saved, I will be saved. So there's none of this Southern Baptist of I'm saved and it was at 10 o'clock on Friday night, because you're being saved. And one day you will be saved, but you're saved. And I think piety is the same thing. It's a process like going on to perfection, that there's not a target. It's just, this is how we live a Christ-like life. And if we do that, then we are practicing piety for other people, and we receive the smoothness of life. If you want to call it a reward, fine, but I'm not even sure you want to do that. But this makes the rough places plain.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got some discussion about piety. And Jesus admonishes us not to practice piety before others. But then he also says, let your light shine before others. So are those in conflict? What do y'all think? I don't think it's in conflict either, but I was just wondering if anybody could articulate. I think I'll go ahead and answer this one. When he says, let your light shine, that's letting your light shine to help others. It's not saying, hey, look at me, So, and so I think it's pretty clear to us practicing Christians that when he says, don't show off. That's different than providing guidance, providing help, trying to be the light of the world or the salt of the world.
Clara,
Yes.
back here we all said it was the intent of what you do.
That's right. Okay, the Greek word for piety is also the same word translated as righteousness or justice. How do you feel piety relates to righteousness?
I think there's a real danger between merging piety with self-righteousness, and I think people that go around wearing their religion on their sleeve may be undermining what it's all about. Mary Walker runs around singing this song, "You'll know we're Christians by our love," and I don't know of any other way you can know a person is a Christian than how he treats other people. Praying out loud and being pious in public is not the way to show your love. I think there are other ways to do it.
That's true. The only time I've really prayed out loud outside of a church environment or a fellowship environment is when Becky was little. Becky's my daughter. I got into the habit, I would pray with her when we were at a restaurant, or one time we were at the airport, and Scott was going on a business trip, so I said, let's go over here, and let's have a prayer for Daddy's journey, that he'll be safe. I was worried about him because he was going to Venezuela, and I was like, But that was my intent there, was to help instruct my daughter in practicing prayer. And I tried to do it softly so nobody would actually hear us. So I think you're right. Self-righteousness can kind of sneak up on us if we're not careful. So J.L. says in her book, to be righteous, to practice the correct type of piety, is to have one foot in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is looking not only at the action, but also the motive behind it. So we're all trying to get our foot into the kingdom of heaven. Maybe put our foot in the door so that they can't shut the door on us.
So like the hokey pokey?
Yep, we could do the hokey pokey.
You put your right foot in.
This would work out for Sunday school, wouldn't it, for the kids? And for us too. We could maybe get in a big circle and do the hokey pokey. Okay, now if somebody else can retrieve a Bible and read Matthew 6, verses 2 to 4 for me.
Jamie, you have it.
So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you.
Okay. So, how do some gift givers in our society sound a trumpet when they give money? Any thoughts? How do they sound? How do some people sound a trumpet when they give money? And I think somebody over here said you get a building named after you. Okay.
Post it on Facebook.
Like sometimes, I mean, I'm often given charity. Some people will look it up, broadcast to everybody in the sun. Why gave X amount of money to this school? Why do you, if you're a sincere person, just give to your charity and you don't have to go broadcast it?
Well, a lot of charities will list names of donors on the program for the ceremony or the gala or whatever they're doing. And there's not anything wrong with that from the charity's viewpoint. They want to encourage people to donate money, and if getting your name on a list and being told thank you encourages you, well, that's a good thing. When you donate to PBS, a lot of times they've got those great gifts. And so it's a good thing from their viewpoint. They've gotten me to donate more because I want the T-shirt, or I want the set of DVDs or whatever they're giving away. But from my viewpoint, is it a good thing for me to give with the desire to get something? You know, am I kind of stepping out of the kingdom of heaven and more into self-righteousness when I do that? She talks in the book about an ancient Jewish a philosopher, author, who had 8 levels of charity. So the first level of charity is when you give something unwillingly. Like she talks about in the Jewish practice, you're required to give so much to the poor. And if you had somebody who did it because, well, it's a duty, you know, their heart isn't really in it, but it's expected, well, that's the first level of giving. Not that it's bad to give unwillingly, it's better than not giving at all, but it's not really what the Lord would like us to do. The second level is giving willingly, but inadequately. Like you give, but you're also like, well, I'm going to give this much because I've got this beach vacation coming up and I want to make sure I have cash. Or I'm going to give this much because I might get laid off and I'm scared. So there's a lot of reasons why people might do that. But you want to try and rise above that and give willingly and give adequately, whatever that is for you. The third level is giving only when asked. She says you should give before you're asked. And then the fourth one is giving when a problem confronts us. You see some poor people in your neighborhood and you donate because you saw them. From her viewpoint and from the Jewish perspective, you should be giving already before you even know there's a problem. You know, there's always going to be poor people, so you should be always mindful of that and not wait until you see somebody begging on the street corner. The fifth one is giving anonymously, but the recipient knows your identity. And again, that's better than not giving. It's not a bad thing. It's just if you're trying to be really showing the light, the love of Jesus to everybody, you want to kind of go to the next level, which is giving where we know the recipient, but they don't know us. Or even better, the seventh level is giving when neither giver nor recipient knows each other. And she talks about how a lot of times synagogues will have a fund everybody donates to. Your donation is anonymous. So there's no opportunity to get a light shown on you. And then the recipients, people in the congregation who need help, can go and get the money. And it's not broadcast that so-and-so had trouble paying their electric bill, and so we gave them money. It kind of preserves everybody's ability to focus on what's at hand, which is giving and receiving with grateful hearts. And she had one more level, which was where you teach somebody how to do something so that they're self-sufficient. Along the same lines as teach a man to fish, and then, you won't need to give him fish. And I think projects like the Heifer Project and other things where we give people in poor countries the resources so that they can then build on the gift and create income for themselves. Giving a poor woman in Africa a couple of chickens, and then they start laying eggs, and she is on her way to some self-sufficiency. That's probably the best, according to the book. But again, I'm not saying don't give. just try and think to yourself, okay, why am I giving? Am I really doing this in the right spirit? And am I expecting a reward? And just kind of be aware of what you're doing. And here's the question: at what level is most of your giving? And you can just think about that. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I think for myself, sometimes I think I'm at level 2. I fill out my check every week here. Could I give more? Perhaps. I need to think about that. And I probably would like to explore more of the giving so that you're helping somebody become more self-sufficient. What are the advantages and disadvantages of announcing how much time or money someone has donated? We kind of covered that, but thinking about it from a church viewpoint, is there an advantage to us declaring how much somebody has donated?
It sets a bar that maybe other people would look at and say, well, I don't know if I can give that much, but I can give something. And then there's some competitive people out there who would say, I need to beat that. So that marketing is part of marketing.
Well, yes, Marilyn.
Part of me just says, oh, amen, no. Some of the churches I've been in actually just hold a box at the back of the church. There's not even an offering plate. It's just a box. And I think part of me just says, maybe for PBS, and I want their bag, and plus I love all their stuff. But I don't have a problem with that. But I think in church, I think it's the part of the thing we're missing is that how can you outgive Jesus? How can you outgive Jesus? So when you're loving Jesus, the bottom line is if there's a need, it's a compelling thing of I want to do it. You've given me so much. I want to honor you and give. But I surely don't want it publicized. I mean, you don't need to have wouldn't that be awful? Let's put it on the bulletin, how much you get. Whoa.
Yeah.
I just think that's awful, but I think the piece is, again, is giving is, yes, it's because of need and everything, but it's also because you just cannot outgive Jesus for what he gave us.
That's very true. Yes.
St. Mark's Church that we help out with from time to time has a wonderful observance that I really think all Methodist churches ought to be doing this. There's a time of offering, and there are flowers on the altar. And everyone is invited forward to go and pick a flower and have a time of prayer and leave the flower on the altar. Flowers are on a table, then you leave it on the altar. And that's the offering time. Then at the end of the service, there's a time to walk past the offering plate if you want to, if you feel like you can. And it's very well explained that, it costs something to run the building and do this kind of stuff. If you can help out, here's an opportunity to do that. And it always amazes me at the number of folks who are there to get a meal, who can't afford to buy a meal, and they bring their 30 cents or their 15 cents and put it in the offering plate. And to me, that's just, it's all 10 of those things encompassed in that process, I think.
Yeah.
Make the offering not about money, but about what your devotion to God.
Now, I've been in a couple of churches where we were doing like a capital campaign. We had to pay off the new Family Life Center or whatever. And my last church, our minister was preaching on what we wanted to do with this capital campaign, and he said, and I personally am going to give this much. And I think he meant well. He was trying to be a leader. He set an example. But then looking at it with these thoughts in mind, I'm wondering how many people how many people then gave because of some competitiveness, or because, well, if he's doing it, then I need to do it. And so I think we have to be careful. What about, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, what about you sign up to give a poinsettia at Christmas, and it's in memory of a loved one, or you sign up to give flowers to honor your anniversary. Is that giving with the hope of some recognition? Or, I'm not saying don't do it. Yes.
Okay, so I think those things can go both ways. Like, I think it can go either way, right? Because if I give and I say, if I say I'm giving this amount, right, I announce it, I could be in that, it could be in the spirit of let your light so shine before men so that they may see your good works and follow your Father which is in heaven. So I'm leading as an example. I'm showing that this is how we support or sustain our community, whatever. So I think like the giving, I think it's also in the intention of the interpreter, like how it moves you.
Yeah.
And you can feel it from the person who's doing it. You can feel if the person's doing it to be boisterous and forward, or if the person is doing it from a place of goodwill and charity.
I think it comes down to what we've been talking about. It comes down to your intent. If I sign up to put flowers on the altar for my anniversary, I'm going to try and do it from a place of being thankful. Yes.
So many of the things we've said has something we can say is wrong for the reason we're giving. I often wonder if we had no campaign, if we didn't pledge, and we had a minister at one time that wanted to do that. He said, we're not going to make pledges. We're just going to have people give what they want to. We all went, you know, but would something, how would you feel about that? What if we just gave what we wanted to? Would our church go on the way it's going?
Well,
And Lane says, no.
well, and
We were really good, you know.
yeah,
Right?
I'm sorry.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to address. One is, if I give for something, I don't want necessarily to get a gift back. That money that they're spending on these gifts, I don't want to discourage PBS, I do that. But it bothers me that they have to give me a gift, because that's not why I'm giving. I'm giving because I've been moved or there's an interest I have. Unfortunately, now, day and age, we got to have budgets. We've got to have money coming in. You cannot maintain these places without a steady income.
Yeah.
And I've learned that being involved in another church. So unfortunately, I've never liked to go to church, and every time you hear about money. But unfortunately, it's a reality that we have to have. If we want to enjoy and get spiritually fed, we have to sustain an establishment. And you can't, although it's nice to not have pledges and stuff like that, unfortunately, that's a necessity, because you've got to have a foundation financially in this day and age. But no, giving, I feel like through my years that I've been very blessed. And I do things that I think there's a calling, and I think that that's something I'm being moved to do, to help. I help the hungry. I help people that are not as well off than I am. So to me, that is, and I'm not looking for recognition, never have. I feel embarrassed when somebody brings it to my attention. But it's because I feel it's the right thing to do, because I've been very blessed.
And I think what we might need to do is try to encourage our fellow believers to focus on the fact that God has given us so much, we need to give some back, and leave it up to each individual to decide how much they want to give. And if if people who have been brought up doing pledges, do pledges, that's a good thing because that helps the church leadership plan. But we want to encourage everybody to give. So I think that's a good thing. I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to just go to one thing. Okay, so at the end of Matthew 5, Jesus tells us to love our enemies and says, be perfect. Therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. This gives a lot of Christians some concern, and I know it has me in the past. I've been like, well, how can I be perfect? Only God's perfect. I can't be perfect. However, what I learned from reading the book is that it's not that Jesus is giving us a command. He's making a statement. If you look at the Greek translations, as our author does, he's saying that we will be perfect if we follow his instructions. And I also learned that the Greek term for perfect is, am I saying it right, teleos? Teleos, is that the Greek word for perfect? Okay, but it actually means complete. So Jesus is telling us that we will be complete if we follow these instructions. And I can embrace working towards being a complete human being, a complete Christian, than perfect. I think our society has made perfect sound so unreachable. But it is being complete. I can embrace that as a worthy goal, and so that's what I'm going to work on. And we're going to watch the video now because I think the author does a good job of summing up everything in her video.
My students will sometimes fuss at me when I talk about practicing piety because they think piety just comes naturally. Well, of course they're good people, and of course they say their prayers, and of course they sing the hymns, and of course they go to church. But piety is actually something that should be practiced. We should train it, like musicians train muscle memory, so that by the time you play after a year or 2 years, your fingers know where to go, your arms know how to move. You internalize this piety. But any musician knows you can't stop practicing. If you want to keep up the talent, if you want to hone it, you have to continue to practice. So what does it mean to practice piety? It means you think before you act. It means you reflect before you go off and you do. Each week, again, you review what you're supposed to do. You check what you've done before. You correct your mistakes and you move on. You practice your piety so you get better at it, so you internalize it, but you don't practice it in front of other people to show off. Because piety, when it is played out perfectly, is done for the greater glory of God and is done for building up the community. For people who live into and out of the Beatitudes, they're not practicing their piety. They just are. Blessed are those who mourn does not mean blessed are those who work at it so that they can show how weepy and teary they are. They're simply mourning. They're practicing, they're enacting who they are. Peacemakers, you have to work at peacemaking, but the focus of peacemaking is not on you. The focus of peacemaking is on the peace that you make. The meek give up their ego, give up their privilege. They're not focused on themselves. What makes them meek is that they are focused on the other. That's how you practice piety, by showing what is truly important, the community, the peacemaking, the building up, and to you eventually, if you work at it, it will come naturally. It will be second nature. Would that we all had it as our second nature, to be merciful, to be peacemakers, to mourn when it is appropriate to mourn, to live out the world as God would have us live it. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells his disciples, "You are the light of the world." However, if you go over to the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." And my students will sometimes say, wait a minute, it's a contradiction. It's not. It's a compliment. When Jesus is not directly in the world, we recognize him in the faces of others. How is he present in the world? He's present in the world when his followers act in what might be called a Christ-like manner. What does it mean to be the light of the world? It doesn't mean you blind the world, because you can have too much light. And if you blind the world, then everything is again focused on you and nobody else can see. To be light of the world is to be, in effect, a flashlight, to point people the way, show them how to move, enact the way Jesus would have you act. And that's the same thing as to be salt of the earth. You don't want to be too salty, because something that's too salty, you spit it out of your mouth. You can't consume it. And if the salt has become diluted, then it can't do its job. What you're doing in being light of the world is you're shedding light on the good. You're showing what good looks like. In being salt of the earth, you're providing taste and nourishment and medicine. Salt should not call attention to itself. Salt should flavor whatever it comes in contact with, so that whatever it comes in contact with, be it food or the community or the world, tastes better, looks shinier, appears brighter. It is the way creation would have it when everything is good. Jesus does not say, just love God and love neighbor and everything else is fine. That's a little bit too easy. That's where you start. But in the Sermon on the Mount, he gives you the details. And sometimes he can seem as if he's asking too much of us. He'll say things like, your righteousness must exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. That's not setting the bar low. That's actually setting it quite high. And then he goes on to say at the end of chapter 5, be perfect, even as your heavenly Father is perfect. And at that point, a number of people will present, I can be pretty good. I can be righteous. I can work on this merciful and peacemaking. But being perfect can't do that. It's a goal. And I think the idea is less a command, be perfect, you must do this, than, but here's how you will be if you live all this out. Judaism did not actually say you have to be perfect. That's what God is. God is perfect. And we are always going to come up short. That's why we have a system of repenting and atoning. That's why when we make a mistake, there's a way of recuperating. And that's why we have not only forgiveness and atonement, but actions of reconciliation. Do we have to be perfect? We can't be. But should we try? If we live out the Sermon on the Mount, if we live out the scriptures of Israel, if we live in the world as God intended us to live in the world, we'll probably not make it to perfection. And we should not become all neurotic if we can't. But we could still have that as a goal. And we can see every once in a while, just as we can somehow feel ourselves as entering that kingdom of heaven, sometimes we can feel at this moment, it's perfect. Practicing piety should not be done to build up the self. If you need to do that, as Jesus says, go into your room and close the door and pray to God, because God knows what's in your heart anyway. Don't do it for show, and don't do it for entertainment. Do it because it's the right thing to do, and do it to be merciful, and to be meek, and to be a peacemaker, and to be part of a community. And then you're moving on toward perfection. Then you're moving on toward the kingdom of heaven. In Judaism, we are commanded to give to charity. It's not voluntary, it is a law. Deuteronomy makes it very clear, because the poor will always be with you. Deuteronomy is very practical. Extend your hand to the poor and needy. Jewish law mandates that we care for the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, the most vulnerable people, people often without safety nets. We are required to take care of them. So what happens if you don't live under Torah law? Sometimes if we're not commanded by law to do something, we simply don't do it. Or we say, well, other people should take care of the poor, or let the government do it. And I do believe the government has some responsibilities here. But Jesus demands that people take care of the poor. Jesus demands we pay it forward. If people took care of us, We should take care of those who need that care. If we have and somebody else needs, we give, because that's what it means to belong to a community. The word for charity or almsgiving in Hebrew is tzedakah. The word for righteousness is tzadak. The word for a holy person is a tzaddik. Righteousness, justification in the Greek, saintliness is all related to charity, and charity is always related to community. Charity is the best way, one of the best ways, of showing what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. Because when you give to charity, when you give to helping others, you recognize that at some point, when times change, when economics change, you may need exactly that same sort of charity. And so in Judaism and in the Sermon on the Mount and in Christianity, as it should be, we are charitable toward each other's because that's what it means to be part of the kingdom of heaven. Luke tells a parable about a widow and a judge, and Luke explains that the parable is about praying always and not losing heart. I think praying always is a good idea, but that means you can pray regardless of what sort of mood you're in. Of course, if you're feeling thankful, yes, give thanks to God. If you've experienced something new, give thanks to God for that new thing. If you're in community, of course you pray within community. That's in part why Jesus taught his followers the Our Father prayer. But you should also pray when you're angry. You should pray when you're mourning. You should pray when you're furious. That's what Psalms of Lament are for. That's what the whole book of Lamentations is for. Because God is big enough to handle your distress. God is big enough to handle your depression and your anger. Pray when you're angry. God, why did you allow this to happen? God, you are the God of graciousness. Why has this person been killed? Why have I lost my job? Why am I suffering from cancer? Pray then, because God knows what's in your heart. The one thing God does not want you to do is say, I've had it, and walk away. Job, when he argues with God, is praying all the way through, because to argue with God, to complain to God, to say to God, why have you forsaken me? That's continuing the relationship. Pray when you're angry. It will probably help.